Hi everyone, my name is Nati and today I'll be showing you some Photoshop basics to hopefully get you started on your personal or class project. Before I begin, I want to describe what Software Training for Students is. We are a service on campus that provides free software training for all UW-Madison students, either through workshops or one-on-ones. If you want more information on our services, you can visit our website at sts.doit.wisc.edu. For today's class, we will be navigating some of the following topics. First, just learning more about the workspace. We'll learn how to remove the background of an image using a layer mask. We'll remove a subject within our existing image. We'll talk a little bit more about the brush and the type tools. We'll explain a little bit more about the layers panel. And we'll be doing some basic image adjustments using layer adjustments, blend modes, and filters. And at the end of the workshop, we'll just save and export. Before we open Photoshop, I do want to make sure that we all know how to download images from the internet, so I'll just be covering that very quickly using Google. All right, so here I have a Google search. It's for within images. I just went to Google, I looked up Camp Randall and got these options. Depending on when you are using Google, this will be looking a little bit different. But as of 2025, this is kind of what your options are. So next to images, once you've searched for an image, you can go to where it says tools and you'll get a little bit of a menu pop up. So right here, you have a couple of options. You have a few options. One is to filter out your search by size of image. Typically, it is better to be using larger images when using Photoshop, just so that you have the ability to scale down, because scaling up an image can oftentimes blur it and affect the quality of your project. So if you click on this little menu, I had already changed it to large. This is where you can change it to be a different size. You can also here update the usage rights. So Creative Commons licenses is often something that a lot of professors request students use when creating projects. If that's something that is being required of you from your professor or your instructor, then you can also filter out from here. You also have these other options you can filter from. This is actually really nice with the color if you are looking for something with a transparent background, although with Photoshop you can remove the background and we'll be going through that also. Once you've found your image that you like, if you want to save it to your computer, that will be best for you to use it for your Photoshop project. You'll want to click on your image from here. It'll show a little display on the side. And then from here, you want to right click on this image, and this is where you can save image as. Here you'll be able to rename the image to whatever you want. By default, it should download to your downloads folder, but you can change this according to where you want to save it. And then you can hit save. And now we can go ahead and open Photoshop. When you open Photoshop for the first time, it might look something like this. You'll have like a little pop-up that comes up describing the new tools that they have. You can go through them if you are curious about it. If you do not want to look through it, you can just click on this X. So my screen might look a little bit different from yours. If this is the first time you're opening Photoshop, this section will be blank for you. If you've previously worked with Photoshop on anything, then your previous projects will be saved to your section here. To create a new project, you just click on this blue button that says New File. A little pop-up window will come up, and from the side, you'll be able to rename your project to whatever you want. So for this one, I can just say practice project, but you can name it whatever you'd like. You can give your project a specific width and height. I'm going to actually invert this. So I'm going to click on my orientation, my landscape option to just quickly flip those numbers. Resolution, again, this will also depend on what your project guidelines are, but typically if you are going to be printing out your project, 300 pixels per inch is a good number. If you're going to keep it as a digital file, then I think 72 pixels per inch should be fine because it's typically going to be on a smaller screen. For your color mode, again, that's going to depend on your project guidelines, but typically if you are going to be keeping this as a digital project, RGB color is great. If you will be printing it out, then you'll want to change it to CMYK color. And this will mostly be helpful because when you're working on your project, it won't give you as many color choices because unfortunately, when you are set to print something, you are more limited in how many colors you are able to actually print out versus what the digital screen is able to show you. Everything else can be left as is, and then you can hit create. A little bit about the workspace. On the left side, you'll see all of the tools that you can use to build your project out. You'll notice that some of the tools have a little triangle at the very corner. That just means that if you click and you hold down on that tool, other tools will come out. Most of the time, they will be tools that are similar to the main tool, but just know that you do have more options that way. For today's class, we won't be going through all of these tools, but just know that you do have many options. From the top, you'll have your files, menus. We'll just be going over a couple of these, but one of the ones that is most helpful to know right away is the window menu. Basically, anything that is selected here is what's showing up on your screen. If I mention something and you don't see it on your screen, then this is where you can go to the window menu and just click on the one that you want, and then it will pop up. So right now you'll see that properties, layers, and color panels are all up for me. So hopefully that's something that you all see, but this is where you can go ahead and make sure that you have what you need. On our right side, you'll have all of the panels that I just mentioned. So for me, I have the color panel. This is going to let me choose different colors. I'll have the properties panel. This is helpful because it changes up according to what I'm selected on. I will say compared to Illustrator or InDesign, the properties panel on Photoshop isn't as robust in my opinion, but it's still helpful because again, it'll kind of the program will kind of figure out like what could be best for you according to what you're selected on. So you'll see this change. Next to properties, you'll see adjustments. This is where we will be able to change up the colors of our image, change the saturation levels or the color or the brightness or contrast. We'll play around with these in a bit, but just know they're right next to the properties panel. And then right underneath, you'll have your layers panel. This is probably the most helpful to know. This is where you can reorganize the various layers or levels of items in your project or the objects in your project. We will practice this a little bit, but this is also where you can add what are called blend modes and add in layer masks as well as some effects styles or some layer styles. At the very top here, we will have this little menu that also changes according to what you're selected on. If you are on the Move tool, something that people enjoy clicking on is this Show Transform Controls. I think by default it isn't checked. So if you want to check it, that's going to let you be able to see your resizing options for whatever images you bring in if you click on them. Otherwise, you will have to do a Command T or Control T to bring up the transform controls to resize images. One more thing is sometimes folks are working and they accidentally bring out these panels and they get a little nervous because they're like, oh no, I accidentally did this. If this happens and your workstation looks different from what it did at the very beginning, you can easily reset this. There's an icon at the very, very corner at the top right. If you click on this icon, you're going to see you're on the Essentials workstation. You can reset your Essentials, and then it will go ahead and pull everything back as to where it was. Navigating this, so if you are using a trackpad, it should be pretty easy to just pan around here. If you don't have a trackpad and you're using a mouse, then holding down your space bar will give you a little hand that you can click and drag over. To zoom in, again, if you're on a trackpad, you should be able to just kind of pinch in and out. And if that's making you lose control of any kind, you can just do Command plus, Command minus to zoom in or out, or Control plus, Control minus if you're using a Windows computer. And finally, if you are super, super zoomed in or something, you lost track of where you are, Command 0 or Control 0 will kind of zoom out your project to the boundaries of it. So with that, let's go ahead and bring in our first image to work with. So to bring in an image, I recommend you go to File and then you go to Place Embedded. The difference between Place Embedded and Place Linked is Place Embedded basically makes a copy of whatever you're bringing in. Place Linked will reference the file that you're bringing in case you're in the future going to make edits to it. It will automatically update to this project because it's linked and not just made a copy. So for this one, I'm just going to do Place Embedded because I know it's just a picture that I'm not necessarily going to edit outside of Photoshop. All right, so for me, I'm going to be downloading a picture called Cow. You can feel free to bring in any image that you have on your computer or you've recently downloaded. You just need to select something that has some subject. Right away, Photoshop, whenever you bring in an image, it's going to want you to resize it to whatever size you want. For now, I'm going to keep mine as a default. It fills up the screen. This will work for me. If you are happy with the size or you've resized it, you can resize by just clicking on these corners. Photoshop goes back and forth on whether the default will be to keep the proportions or not. If yours is kind of wavy like this, you can hold down your Shift key and then it will keep the proportions. But once you're done and happy with the size, you can just click done on this little banner here, or you can hit return on your keyboard or enter. Every time you import something, it'll become a new layer that you can adjust accordingly. So I'll be showing you a few ways to remove the background or remove just parts of the background using various selection tools. I'll kind of start from the easiest to kind of the one that requires the most steps. It's not necessarily difficult, it's just more steps to have to consider. So the easiest route to removing a background is by selecting your image, and then from the banner that should appear at the very bottom, you should be able to have a button that says remove background that you can click on. And you'll see that the program did its best to try to remove the background. It kind of knew that this is the subject I wanted selected, but you'll notice that I didn't actually remove everything I wanted. If it's close enough, then you can just manually clean it up using the layer mask that was created. You'll notice we clicked the remove background button and the system automatically did a bunch of steps that at one point 5-10 years ago would have been 3 different steps. So it removed the background. It created what we call a layer mask. So you'll see that our layers here, we have our cow layer, but we have a new part up to that layer. And it looks predominantly black, but then if you look closely, this white area looks kind of the shape of the cow. A layer mask in Photoshop is really helpful because it helps with editing the picture without actually destroying the original version of the picture. So what we did is we were basically hiding parts of this picture with a layer mask. Technically, the background is still available to us if we want to bring it back, but we are hiding it temporarily with this mask. So anything that's white is revealed, anything that's black is hidden. So for us, if we wanted to hide the rest of these parts manually, then we could by simply making sure we're selected on the layer mask, not the image, actual layer mask. And then from our tools panel, we can bring our brush tool up. And then from here, as long as we are on the color black and not white, because black hides, white reveals, we then should be able to basically paint over this to hide the elements we don't want. Let's say I accidentally remove too much, or there are elements here that I'm noticing are actually missing. I then can just revert this to white. So I'm going to change my color to white by just clicking on this little double arrow because those were available to me. Or from this color picker here, you can move this to the very, very corner to get white. And then you can reveal parts of your image that you want. So you'll notice, oh, this is going to be, I'm revealing too much at this point. Actually, I need to make this black again, or make from my color picker, change it to black, and then go ahead and do my best to remove some of the elements I don't want. You'll notice my brush is kind of large. From the top here, you can change the size of your brush to be a little smaller. You can also change the hardness of the brush. So right now the edge of my brush is really, really hard. You can feather that out by making it a smaller percentage. And then you'll notice it's a little bit more faded out. All right, so let's say clearly that remove background button didn't do the best job with this image. So I'm actually going to help the program determine this is the object I want, and I'm going to make sure that the boundaries are a little bit clear. To do that, I can go to the object selection tool. It should be like the fourth tool down. It looks like a little square with a rectangle selection over it. This tool is nice because what it does is if you're hovered over any part of your image, it kind of isolates the various pieces of it. So realistically, if I wanted to just select this cow specifically, I could do it with this feature. I'm going to still try to continue with this cow just because I've already worked with it. And so if I want to select it now, once it's pink, I just click once on this. The program will do its best to select it. And then what I can do is I can click on this layer mask button. So it should appear from this banner. It's also found at the very bottom of your layers panel. It looks like a rectangle with a circle in the middle. If you click on that, it will quickly try its best to remove the rest of the background. You'll notice that if you are still selected on this tool, it'll still try to grab onto other pieces that are hidden in the background because remember, the layer mask just hides elements, it doesn't permanently remove them. All right, so that's the second way that you can remove the background. First, by selecting the object more intentionally. So let's say like I use this feature and it's doing what it can, but I'm still not happy with it. There is one more intensive step that you can do to select things. I can select my object. I can then go to select and mask. This, I think usually by default, your transparency is set to 0. Make sure your transparency is all the way to 100. But this is where you can change up the edge and do some refinements. So this is where you can tell the program, I want you to change the edge radius a little bit. I want you to be more feathered out because, I want a particular look to my image selection. Or you can change even the edge in which it's selecting. You have a lot of options here and you can play around with them. The only thing you have to know to do is at the very end, at the very bottom, you have this option that says output to. Instead of selection, make sure it's layer mask because then it'll do what our previous versions have done, which is just create a layer mask for you. But it's taken into considerations those extra elements that you've added with the edge. So we just did 3 options. 1, just clicking the button. 2, selecting the object and adding a layer mask. And then 3, selecting an object, but doing a select and mask option instead. One last selection that we can do. Let's say we want all of the cows, but we don't want the sky. All right, so within your object selection tool, you should see a quick selection tool right underneath it. This lets you select multiple parts of your image, not just one object. So to make sure this works, make sure you're selected on the right layer. Then from here, you should be able to select parts of your image. So I'm just going to click and drag a selection. The program will try its best to kind of select based off of color or similar colors. And I'm going to select everything that is here except for the sky. If there are areas that you accidentally selected too much of, you can, at the very top here, have the option to deselect pieces of it. You can also change up your brush size right next to here, similar to what we did earlier. So if there are little spaces that you need to deselect, then this is where you could do it. But for the most part, I'm just going to leave this here. This is good. All right, and then similarly, we can do after we do this is we can go back to the selected mask, refine our edges, add whatever effects here we want to add. Before I hit OK, make sure that the output selection is to a layer mask. And then we have this. So now we have something that has no sky background. So if I wanted to add my own background, this is where I could make it work. And again, if I wanted to edit further, I can go to my layer mask, go to my brush, and then just paint over the areas I want to either hide or reveal. All right, so with that, let's move on with our next example. So I will be bringing in one more. So I'm going to place embedded, and then I'm going to bring in Bucky Badger here. All right, so I have Bucky Badger. For my cow, I'm just going to hide my cow. So you can click on that little eyeball next to it and it'll just temporarily hide it. So for this one, I suspect that removing the background will not work. So I will actually use my object selection tool. And for this one, instead of doing a rectangle mode, I'm actually going to change this up to a lasso. And this is going to give me a little bit more control to kind of select my object. So instead of just making a rectangle or using the preview that the program is giving me, I'm going to actually do my best to select this. So this is optional for folks, but this is in case you have a object that's a little bit more organic. That looks like a really good selection. So actually I'm going to go ahead and just click on my layer mask. And that is good. I'm happy with that. If I really wanted to, I could go back and again use my brushes to paint over my layer mask. But for now, this looks really good. So then after I've brought this in, I'm going to go ahead and bring in my background. So I will again place embedded, and now I'm going to bring in a background that I have. You can bring in any background that you want. So I'm going to resize this, holding down my shift key to keep the proportions as they are. And then I'm going to hit return or click done on my banner. So clearly I brought this image after I was working on Bucky. So this is currently at the very top of the layer, meaning it's hiding everything underneath because it's consuming the whole width and size of my project. If I want this to be under, I can just click and drag this until I see Bucky appear, and then we're good to go. Something that folks sometimes want to do is remove a subject. So let's just say for us, it's going to be this random person here sitting. To do that, we can do that a couple ways. The first step you want to have to do though is you want to rasterize your picture. So for this one, you just right click on your layer. In this case, it'll be my background layer. And then there should be an option that says rasterize layer. Once you do that, you'll be able to use the effect that we want. The first thing for this one is you're going to want to select the object. For this one, you could use the object selection tool. However, I'm just actually going to use our regular selection tool, which is just lasso. And for the lasso, I've used it once, but for this one, it'll just be this object here to select. And I kind of want to give it some boundary just so that it can pick up better what's around it. Once I've made the selection from the banner at the bottom, you should see this little paint bucket, and then you should see one that says Content Aware Fill. Click on that, and then just hit OK. And the program will do its best to reference things around it to kind of fill in this little selection. This option works best if you have a smaller subject you want to remove. The larger the subject gets, or the more crowded it gets, like in this case, let's say I wanted to remove this person specifically, it might not work as well. It did okay, but you'll still notice that it looks a little just blurry and a little odd. So make sure that the subject you do want to remove does have enough space around it to be able to kind of let the machine reference to fill it back in. Now to change up the colors, I'm going to click on my background here. And then next to properties, I had mentioned adjustments. This is where you can change up the colors and the brightness. So let's go ahead and change the brightness levels. So I just clicked on brightness and contrast. You'll see that it popped up in my layers as a brand new layer. And then from here, you can go ahead and adjust as needed. You will notice that this only applies to the layers right underneath it. So this will only apply to Camp Randall. So if I were to do even like a color balance, let's really pick up that red, then it's only applying it to this layer here. And again, you'll notice that anytime I apply an adjustment layer, it creates a brand new layer here. So this is where if you change your mind and you don't want something, you can delete it or you can hide it temporarily to just see what it looks like. Because we're doing deconstructive editing, this is going to allow us to bring back elements that we kind of changed up. If you do want to um, readjust any of these settings, you can just click on it and it will, within the properties, bring you back to this little area for you to readjust. Let's say we want to adjust Bucky's light or color or something. We can go back to adjustments. Let's say he's looking a little dull. Let's like brighten him up also. You will notice that the moment I apply this, it's not just applying to Bucky, it's applying to my entire image. And the reason for that is because this is at the very top of my project, this new brightness contrast 2 layer, meaning it's affecting everything that is beneath it. I can, however, isolate this by just clicking one icon. So if I just click on this icon at the very beginning at the bottom of my properties panel, this is going to isolate my selection to only apply to whatever layer is immediately beneath it. So in this case, just Bucky. So this is just something good to know in the case that you need to isolate any adjustments. So next, what I want to do is I want to work with text. So to add text, you can go ahead and just click on the horizontal type tool. If you click and hold on that, you'll get more options. You also have the option to do a vertical type. But for this one, I will just click and drag a box. Automatically, it will fill in with some lorem ipsum, some just dummy text. So I can just go ahead and start typing. Once I've written out what I want, I can select it. And then from the properties panel, this is where you can change up the font. Let me just use a random one. This is also where you can change up the color of your font. Unfortunately, when you want to change your color, it's not from here or from here. It's actually from the properties panel within the color section here. This is also where you can do a color picker. So if you were just clicking on any part of your project, it can reference a color that way. And this is also where you can change up the hex color if you have a hex code. I'm going to make it larger. I'm just going to click and drag here. You could also input your number here. If you want to see what other options you have for your font, you can scroll down or you can click on these 3 dots and you'll have more options this way. Some other effects that could be helpful and just kind of fun if you're doing more of an artsy type of project are blend modes. So within the layers panel, you'll have this little menu item that just says normal. So I'm clicked right now on my subject, my Bucky Badger. If I were to click on that menu and just go down this list, you'll see Bucky interacting differently with the layers immediately behind him. And that is just a blend mode. So it'll kind of blend differently according to whatever you're selected on. You can also change up how much the intensity that you want. So if you do want to make this more opaque, you can click on the opacity and change that up if that's something that will help your project. The last thing that can be helpful if you're working on a collage of some kind are the various effects that you have here. So if you want to add a layer style, you can click on where it says effects. Make sure you're selected on the image you want to change up. But if you click on effects, you can add some of these options. So like a drop shadow is pretty popular or a stroke color. So I'm going to go ahead and click on stroke. And what this does is it kind of just takes the outline of your image and you can add a stroke color to it. So mine's set white. I'll just leave that white, but you can change how big that stroke is. So you don't have to do this manually. It just kind of does it for you. And it's kind of cool. It gives this more graphic effect. You can also change the position to be inside or outside. And then you can even do a blend mode within just that stroke color as well. So all of these are options that you can play around with. If you don't want it to be added, you can just click on the little check mark and it'll no longer add it for you. But you do have some other options. So a drop shadow, you'll notice the difference this way. You can play up with the angles and change it up however you want. So other random things that could be helpful and fun for your project is clipping masks. So if you've worked with clipping masks in Illustrator, this will be very, very similar. So basically, you can give your existing images different shapes, which is really fun. So in Photoshop, you have the option to add in shapes. So for me, let's say I want an ellipse. So I can just click and drag a shape. You do want to make sure that a fill color is in your shape for this to work. You can change up the fill color from different areas, from either the banner, the very top, or from your properties panel. Just make sure there is a fill color. The stroke color isn't necessary for this. So for this to work, all you really need to make sure to do is to have your image be above the shape. So you've created your shape, right, where you kind of want it to exist. So I want it to be right over this cow. You would just have to move this to be right beneath that image. And then with your image, you want to select it, and then from the layers panel, right click on it, and you'll get an option that says create clipping mask. Once you hit create clipping mask, it's going to then automatically adjust itself to be the shape and the size of whatever shape you gave it underneath. So now I have this little option for my project. You can do this with any shape. You can also do it with text. The only thing you have to remember after you're done with this is that these are still two separate layers. So if you are wanting to move this, you'll notice, oh no, I'm just moving my image within my shape. I'm actually moving everything together. So the last step you'll want to do if you do this for a project is you want to select both of these by just holding down your command or your control to select both. Once they're both selected, you have this option to link. So it's that first icon at the very bottom of your layers. Now, if you go ahead and you move it, it's all linked, so you won't have to worry. And this is something you can even resize if you want. You can also do this with text. So let's say I want to write down cows, and I want to make this really, really big. I want there to be a cow in this. I can do this the same way. So I have my cows, but I have my image. I'm going to move my image all the way up so it's right above my text. I'm going to right click on my image and then do a create clipping mask. And now it's going to clip onto whatever was immediately below it. Again, if I want to make sure that this is linked up, I select both of them, holding down my command or my control button, click both, click on my little link, and now this is something I can add for my project. All right, so aside from those random things, let's get into saving. So I'm going to bring back my original project. Let's say I'm working on this, right, and I'm really happy with it. I want to go ahead and save this. I can go to a file. First, save as. Make sure you're saving as you're working on your project. For Photoshop, you do have the option to save to the cloud and your computer. I suggest you save to both because you never know when one will not work. So save to both. You can save as. I would recommend you first save on your computer. Select where to save it here, or if you have like an external hard drive that you want to save it to. Hit save, it'll save to whatever folder you were selected on. And then afterwards, go ahead and click and save as to your Creative Cloud. Once you're done saving, if you are ready to export this as an image, whether that be a JPEG or a PNG, then you can export it as a file, export, and then export as. And here you'll have the option to format this to whatever you want, PNG, JPEG, GIF. And then you can also set the quality. The default should be fine as is, but maybe ask to confirm with your instructor. Then you'll export, and then once you export as a JPEG or as a PNG, this is now shareable to whoever you want. You can share this to the internet, you can share this to your friends as just an image that you send over. You won't be able to share out your Photoshop project file unless the other person has Photoshop. In the case it's needed, I don't think typically folks save their Photoshop projects as PDFs, but you can also do that. So if you do go back to the file save as on your computer, you do have the option to save as a Photoshop PDF or as a TIFF file. Some professors or some instructors want the highest quality that you can offer them, and a TIFF file is that. But again, double check with your instructor how they want you to submit your project. All right, so we have completed our basics with Photoshop. Clearly, you'll see that this is more for collage style projects, but hopefully this will get you started for whatever you need. And then just as a reminder, if you do need any additional assistance, then you can go to our website, sts.doit.wis.edu. You can request an appointment with one of our trainers. We do offer drop-ins. You will have to see what our schedule looks like. It varies semester by semester, but if you go to our website, you'll be able to see when folks are available for what topic. And then if you just want to learn something new, you can attend our workshop. You can register for free. And those are held at College Library Room 2257. I hope folks enjoyed this lesson. Good luck with your projects, and hopefully we will work with you soon.